Who gave permission to do this? The words exploded out of James Harlan's mouth before his mind had time to catch up with his eyes for a split second. He thought he was seeing a reflection, some strange trick of light bouncing off glass and steel in the half-dark of early morning. This office did that sometimes. It distorted space, made everything feel unreal before sunrise. Then the chair moved. James Harlan froze just inside the doorway of his executive office. One hand still wrapped around the cool metal handle. His heart slammed hard against his ribs. Not from fear, but from shock so sudden it felt physical. This floor was private. This office was sealed. No assistant, no executive, no security chief. No one entered this room without his direct authorization. No one but him. And yet a child was sitting at his desk. Who gave permission to do this? He repeated louder now, the authority in his voice sharpened by instinct and disbelief. The girl flinched. It was small, almost imperceptible. A brief tightening of her shoulders. A tiny hitch in her breath, but James saw it. Her fingers paused above the keyboard for half a second, as if startled by the sound of his voice, but her eyes never left the screen. That detail unsettled him more than anything else. She didn't turn around right away, didn't scream, didn't jump down from the chair or look for an escape. Instead, she leaned closer to the monitor, studying something with intense concentration. Her face lit by shifting lines of data. James's mind raced. This office was protected by layered biometric access, retinal scan, fingerprint, encrypted personal key. The workstation itself was air-gapped, isolated from the rest of the building's network. He had approved every protocol personally. He had trusted no one else with final authority. This space was designed to be untouchable. "Step away from the computer," he said, forcing his voice into calm, even as his pulse thundered in his ears. Right now. The girl swallowed. He saw her throat move. She was young, much younger than he had first registered. 6 years old, maybe 7 at most. Her feet dangled above the floor, sneakers hovering inches from the polished wood as if gravity itself hadn't quite claimed her yet. "I just need one more second," she murmured. The words were barely audible, but they landed with weight. James took a slow step forward. Then another, stopping at the edge of the desk. Up close, the impossible became undeniable. The monitors were active, not locked. Windows overlapped and reorganized themselves as the cursor moved with deliberate precision. System architecture diagrams, security pathways, live diagnostic feeds. His feeds. Anger flared, sharp and instinctive. Not just at the intrusion, but at what it implied, at the failure, at the idea that someone had slipped past a system built to anticipate every threat. "Do you have any idea where you are?" he asked. She nodded faintly. "Your office." "That's right," James said. "And no one is allowed in here. No one. Do you understand that?" This time she did turn her head slightly, just enough for him to see her face in profile. Her eyes were wide, dark, and serious. Too serious for someone her age. There was no mischief there. No thrill of doing something forbidden. Only urgency. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I came early." James stared at her. Outside the windows, Manhattan was waking up. Traffic crawled through intersections. Delivery trucks rumbled below. The city moved forward, oblivious to the fact that the most secure room in one of its most secure buildings had just been breached by a child. "How did you get in here?" he demanded. She hesitated just for a moment. Then she answered, still watching the screen. The cameras don't all wake up at the same time. She said, there's a little gap. My dad said, gaps are where problems hide. James's stomach tightened. That wasn't something a 6-year-old should know. He followed her gaze to the monitor and felt a cold ripple pass through him. The system map pulsed softly, sections lighting up and dimming in steady rhythm. At first glance, everything looked normal, clean, efficient, exactly as designed. But then he saw it, a narrow segment near the core. A relay zone meant to reduce redundancy, to streamline performance. It flickered just slightly out of sync with the rest of the grid. So, you decided to fix it? James said, his voice edged with disbelief. She nodded again. It's not watching itself, she said. It only watches everyone else. The simplicity of the sentence made it worse. James had reviewed that architecture dozens of times. So had senior engineers with decades of experience. The segment she was pointing to was intentional, optimized, elegant, and suddenly unmistakably vulnerable. That part can't be accessed externally, he said, more to reassure himself than her. She shook her head. It can if you already know where it's blind. Silence filled the room, heavy and charged. James became acutely aware of how alone they were. No assistants on the floor yet. No footsteps in the hallway. If he called security now, they would arrive to find a child at his workstation and a system doing something it should not have been able to do, and he would have to explain how it happened. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated this time, her fingers finally leaving the keyboard as she turned fully to face him. Up close, she looked even younger. Small hands, slight frame, a face that still carried the softness of early childhood. "Lily," she said. "And why are you here, Lily?" Her gaze dropped, just for a moment before lifting again. "My dad used to work here," she said. Before they said he broke the rules. The words struck something deep and buried. James straightened slowly. He remembered the file now. A security engineer. Quiet, thorough, terminated after an internal breach investigation that had closed too neatly, too cleanly. At the time, James had signed off without question. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. "This is dangerous." "I know," Lily replied. "But if I don't fix it, someone bad will find it first. And then they'll say, 'My dad did it again.'" That was when James understood this wasn't curiosity. This wasn't a child wondering where she didn't belong. This was purpose. He looked around his office, the glass walls, the silent screens, the city stretched beneath them like a circuit board, and felt the first real fracture in his certainty. For years, he had believed that control was a matter of design, that if a system was built well enough, it would protect itself. Now, a 6-year-old girl sat in his chair, eyes locked on his computer, trying to repair something the adults had missed. And James Harlan realized with a chill that settled deep in his chest that whatever Lily had uncovered was not just a flaw in his software. It was a flaw in the world he had trusted. James did not call security. The realization came to him slowly, almost reluctantly as he stood there watching Lily's eyes track patterns on the screen with unnerving focus. His hand hovered near his phone, thumb resting just above the edge where a single press would trigger a silent alert. Protocol demanded it, common sense demanded it, yet something deeper held him still. "Take your hands off the keyboard," he said again, more quietly this time. Lily's fingers stilled. She obeyed the instruction precisely, lifting both hands and placing them flat on her knees. Still, the screen continued to update on its own. Lines of data adjusting as processes completed cycles she had already set in motion. I didn't change anything important, she said quickly, as if afraid the silence might harden his resolve. I was just watching it happen. James studied her, searching for signs of deception or bravado. There were none. Her shoulders were tense now. Her small back straight against the chair, but her gaze flicked only briefly toward him before returning to the monitor. Not defiance, vigilance. You understand that what you did is illegal, he said. She nodded once. My dad told me that sometimes doing the right thing gets you in trouble. Anyway, the sentence hit harder than he expected. If this moment made you pause and think, share your thoughts in the comments where you are watching right now. Do you believe doing the right thing should ever come with a price? Please like this video if the story moved you and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story. James pulled his chair back and sat down across from her, choosing a position where he could see both Lily and the screen. The leather creaked softly under his weight. From this angle, the system map filled his vision, every node and relay painfully familiar. How long have you been here? He asked. Since it was still dark, Lily replied. I waited until the cleaning people finished the big floors. They don't like the top ones. That made sense. The executive levels were cleaned last, often by a skeleton crew eager to leave before dawn. James made a mental note of yet another gap no one had bothered to close. And no one saw you. She hesitated. They saw me, she said carefully. They just thought I belonged with someone else. James exhaled through his nose. He had lived long enough to understand exactly what that meant. He leaned closer to the screen. Show me what you were looking at. Lily glanced at him, uncertainty flickering across her face. For the first time since he had walked in, she seemed unsure. You won't be mad, she asked. James paused. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking. Dismantled competitors with a single phone call. Yet answering a 6-year-old felt like stepping onto unstable ground. I can't promise I won't be upset, he said honestly. But I will listen. That seemed to matter. Lily reached out again, fingers hovering for a brief second before returning to the keyboard. This time, she worked more slowly, as if narrating her thoughts for him rather than racing ahead. She opened a layered view of the security architecture, isolating a narrow channel near the core. This part, she said, pointing. It doesn't talk back. James frowned. It doesn't need to. It's a relay. I know, Lily replied. But everything that matters talks back. She toggled a diagnostic overlay. Tiny delays appeared, fractions of a second invisible to casual monitoring but glaring when stacked together. James's breath caught as recognition set in. She wasn't wrong. Who showed you how to read this? He asked. My dad, Lily said. He said systems are like people. If you only listen to them when they're loud, you miss the truth. James leaned back, the weight of the statement settling into him. He remembered saying something similar years ago back when Apex Vanguard was nothing more than an idea scribbled on a whiteboard. What's your father's name? He asked, though he already suspected he knew. Lily's fingers tightened together. Oliver Reed. There it was. The file surfaced in his mind immediately. Senior security analyst. 10 years with the company, dismissed after an internal review found evidence of unauthorized access attempts. The investigation had been swift, decisive, and at the time unremarkable. James had trusted the process. When did he leave? James asked. Last year, Lily said. After that, he stopped talking about work. Then he stopped talking about a lot of things. As James looked at her hands, small and clenched in her lap. And you decided to fix this for him? She shook her head. No, I decided to stop it from happening again. The distinction was important. James stood and walked to the window, needing space to think. Below him, the city moved with practiced indifference. People went to work believing the systems they relied on were solid, tested, fair. He had built those beliefs. When you came in, he said slowly. What did you expect to happen? Lily thought for a long moment. I thought I would finish before you got here, she admitted. I wanted to leave you a note. A note, James repeated. She nodded. My dad says people listen more when they're not embarrassed. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of James's mouth. Your dad sounds like a wise man. He used to be happier, Lily said softly. The room fell quiet again, filled only by the muted hum of servers hidden behind walls. James felt the familiar pressure of responsibility tighten in his chest. But this time, it wasn't about shareholders or headlines. It was about the cost of being wrong. You can't stay here, he said finally. Lily's eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. I know, she said quickly. I'm almost done. That's not what I mean, James replied. He turned back to face her. You can't be the one carrying this. She studied him, searching for something. Will you look at it? She asked. Really look. Not like last time. The words stung. I will, James said. But you need to tell me everything you know. Starting from the beginning. Lily nodded, relief and exhaustion mingling on her face. She slid out of the chair, standing beside it, suddenly very small in the vastness of the office. I just want them to stop saying my dad did something bad, she said. He didn't. James met her gaze and felt a quiet resolve settle in. Then let's find the truth, he said. The whole thing for the first time since he had walked into his office that morning. Lily looked away from the computer and directly at him, and she believed him. James locked the office door. The soft click echoed louder than it should have, sealing them inside a room that suddenly felt smaller, heavier. He didn't do it out of fear that Lily might run, but because for the first time he was aware of how exposed this moment was. If anyone walked in now, an assistant, a security chief, a board member, there would be no clean explanation, only consequences. Sit, he said gently, pulling one of the smaller chairs closer to the desk. Lily obeyed, folding her hands in her lap the way children did when they were trying very hard to be good. Her eyes flicked once toward the door, then back to the monitors, as if worried the system might change without her watching it. James returned to the workstation. The screen still displayed the layered architecture Lily had opened. The narrow relay zone pulsing faintly, almost shyly, at the center of everything. This design, James said slowly, more to himself than to her, went through 6 review boards. Lily nodded. That's why nobody looked at it twice. He glanced at her. Explain that. She slid off the chair and pattered closer, careful not to touch anything without permission. When something passes all the checks, she said, people think it's safe. My dad says that's when it's the most lonely. Lonely, James repeated. No one watches it anymore, Lily explained. Because everyone thinks someone else already did. James felt a chill creep up his spine. He pulled up the original design notes, the ones he hadn't looked at in years. There it was, the relay optimization, approved. Unanimously. A clever solution to reduce system load during peak operations. Elegant, efficient, blind. Show me exactly what you saw, he said. Lily climbed back onto the chair, this time waiting until he nodded before touching the keyboard. Her movements were slower now, deliberate, almost ceremonial. She navigated to a log file buried beneath layers of routine system noise. At night, she said, this part goes quiet. Too quiet. James watched as she isolated a sequence of timestamps. Nothing obvious, no alerts, no failures. Then she overlaid a secondary feed. The pattern emerged immediately. Access requests routed through the relay weren't disappearing. They were being deferred, redirected just long enough to bypass scrutiny before rejoining the system as legitimate traffic. James's throat tightened. That shouldn't be possible, he murmured. Lily shrugged. It's only possible if you know it's there. He ran his own diagnostic, fingers flying now, years of muscle memory returning. The results confirmed it. Every access routed through that relay inherited the trust of the system without ever being fully examined. A perfect place to hide. When did you find this? He asked. Lily hesitated. After my dad came home with his box. The words were simple, but the image they conjured was not. James pictured it easily. A cardboard box. A man carrying his career in his arms. The quiet humiliation of being escorted out by people who used to greet you by name. He didn't tell me what happened at first, Lily continued. He just kept saying he should have been more careful. James swallowed. He was careful, Lily said, her voice firmer now. That's why they blamed him. James leaned back, running a hand through his hair. He had seen this before. Not here, not at Apex Vanguard, he told himself, but elsewhere. In other companies, other industries, the quiet math of blame, where it was easier to sacrifice one good man than to confront a system-wide failure, or worse, intentional abuse. Your father reported this, James said. Lily nodded. He said he wrote everything down. He said he followed the rules. And then the evidence disappeared. James finished. She looked up at him, startled. How did you know? Because he'd seen it too many times. James turned back to the screen and pulled up access histories from the period surrounding Oliver Reed's termination. At first glance, everything looked clean. Too clean. Logs trimmed. Metadata normalized. Human hands had been there, smoothing edges. Someone with authority did this, James said. Lily's shoulders sagged slightly, as if a weight she'd been carrying finally had a name. I told my mom, she said. She said, grown-ups don't like it when you point at their mistakes. A bitter truth delivered without bitterness. Lily, James said carefully. You understand how dangerous this was, right? Coming here alone. She nodded. But it was more dangerous to stay quiet. The answer left him momentarily speechless. He remembered being that young, sitting at his mother's kitchen table while she balanced bills and worry in equal measure. Remembered promising himself he would build something that made the world fairer, safer. Somewhere along the way, fairness had been replaced by efficiency. When you were working, he asked, what were you trying to do? Fix it or prove it? Lily considered the question. Both, she said. If I fix it, they can't say my dad did it again. If I prove it, maybe they'll say they're sorry. James closed his eyes. Apologies did not come easily to institutions or to men like him. You did more than most adults would have, he said quietly. She shook her head. I just didn't stop looking. James felt that land somewhere deep. He saved copies of the logs Lily had uncovered, exporting them to an isolated drive he kept for emergencies. The act felt significant, like crossing an invisible line. This stays between us for now, he said. Do you understand? Lily nodded, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. Are you going to tell them? Not yet, James replied. First, I need to understand how far this goes. She seemed to accept that trust cautiously given outside the office. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway. The building was waking up. Soon this moment would be swallowed by routine meetings, explanations. James straightened, feeling the familiar weight of leadership settle on his shoulders. Altered but unmistakable. Lily, he said, I'm going to ask you to do something very hard. She looked up at him, unafraid. I need you to leave this to me, he continued. At least for now. Her lips pressed together. You promise you won't forget? James met her gaze. I promise I will not look away. Asked his owner. For a long moment, she studied his face as if testing the truth of his words against everything she had learned so far about adults. Then she nodded. Okay, she said, but if you do forget, I'll come back. Despite himself, James almost smiled. In that instant, he understood something he had missed for years. The blind spot in his system wasn't just technical. It was human. James waited until Lily had finished her sentence before speaking again. I need to understand exactly how you got in, he said. Lily looked up at him, her expression tightening just slightly. Not fear, calculation, the look of someone deciding how much truth was safe to give. The back service entrance, she said at last. The one near the loading dock. James frowned. That entrance requires an access badge. Lily nodded. For people who work here. And you don't. No, she agreed. But the door stays open longer in the morning for the carts. James closed his eyes briefly. Of course it did. Small optimizations designed to make life easier. Designed by people who never imagined they could be misused. When? He asked. Between 5 and 6, Lily replied. When the night people are tired and the day people aren't here yet. The first gap. James walked slowly around the desk. The city stretching wide and indifferent behind him. He had always believed that true security wasn't about walls or locks. It was about timing, about knowing when attention drifted. And attention always drifted when no one thought it mattered. Did anyone talk to you? He asked. Not really, Lily said. One man asked who I was waiting for. And I said, my dad. James felt a familiar, uncomfortable recognition settle in his chest. People rarely questioned a child who spoke with certainty, especially a quiet one, especially one who didn't look like trouble. After that, Lily continued. They stopped asking. James turned back to her. You shouldn't have been able to get past the elevators. Lily tilted her head. I didn't use them. He stiffened. Explain. She pointed toward the far wall where a narrow panel blended almost invisibly into the architecture. The stairs, she said. The emergency ones. They don't have cameras on every landing. James stared. Those stairwells were designed decades ago, long before Apex Vanguard had existed. They had been upgraded, reinforced, monitored, but only in places where regulations required. No one liked emergency stairs. No one lingered there. They were overlooked by design. The second gap. How long were you in the building? James asked quietly. Lily's voice dropped. Since last night. You stayed here overnight, he said. She nodded. I found a place behind the supply room. It was cold. James felt a sharp, unexpected surge of anger, not at Lily, but at the building, the system himself. A 6-year-old child had slept inside his headquarters, hiding from the world, and no alarm had sounded. No one had noticed. Why didn't you leave? He asked. Lily looked down at her shoes. Because if I went home, I might not come back. And if I didn't come back, no one would fix it. James had no immediate response to that. He pulled out his phone, not to call security, but to check the time. 6:42 a.m. In less than 20 minutes, assistants would begin arriving. Then, executives, then the carefully ordered chaos of a company at full speed. Time once again was slipping. Lily, he said, lowering his voice. You understand that if someone else finds out you were here, they won't see this the way I do. She nodded. They'll say I'm lying. They'll say worse. James said. They'll say you were used or that your father sent you. Her jaw tightened. He didn't, she said firmly. He doesn't even know I'm here. That worried James more than anything else so far. You came alone, he said. Yes, and no one knows where you are. Lily hesitated. My mom thinks I'm at school. James felt the weight of that settle heavily between his shoulders. This stops now, he said. She looked up sharply. I told you I'm almost done. That's not what I mean, he said. This stops because you are not safe. I was safe before, Lily said quietly. Before they said my dad did something bad. James exhaled slowly. He recognized that logic, the logic of children forced to grow up around broken promises. Safety was not a place. It was an idea, and once it cracked, it never fit quite the same way again. You shouldn't have to do this, he said. I know, Lily replied. But I can. He studied her again, seeing not just intelligence, but endurance, something steadier than courage. Tell me about your dad, he said. Lily's shoulders relaxed a fraction. He likes pancakes, she said. But he burns them when he's sad. James waited. He used to laugh more, she continued. He used to tell me stories about fixing things, about how if you follow the rules will protect you. Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied again. Now he doesn't say that anymore. James turned back to the screen, needing the structure of data to keep his thoughts from fracturing. He pulled up internal access permissions from the last 18 months, narrowing the field. Patterns emerged quickly now that he knew where to look. Deferred reviews, overridden flags. Approvals signed digitally, but never questioned. This wasn't negligence. This was design. Someone knew about the relay, James said aloud. Lily nodded. My dad said someone always knows. A minute. And they used it. James continued. They used it to make him look guilty. Yes. James felt something settle into place. A hard cold clarity. He had trusted layers of management to surface problems. Instead, the layers had buried them. He looked at Lily again. You didn't fix it, he said. She frowned. Not yet. You found it, James said. That matters more. He moved decisively now, opening a secure channel on his phone, not to security, but to his personal legal counsel. He typed a brief message, careful with his words. Need immediate review. Potential internal manipulation. High sensitivity. He locked the phone and looked back at Lily. I'm going to make sure you get home, he said safely. Her eyes widened. You're not calling them. No, James said. I'm calling someone who knows how to listen. She seemed to consider this, weighing his words against everything she had learned about adults. What if they don't believe you? She asked. James met her gaze. Then I'll make them do. The confidence in his voice surprised even him. He stood and walked toward the door, then stopped. Before we leave, he said, there's something I need you to understand. Lily waited. You didn't break my system, James said. You showed me where it broke first. She nodded slowly. That's what my dad says fixing really is. James opened the door just as voices echoed faintly down the hallway. The day was beginning whether he was ready or not. He glanced back once more at the glowing screens at the relay zone that pulsed quietly, exposed at last. The gap had been found, and once found, it could no longer be ignored. James stepped into the hallway first. The executive floor was no longer silent. Footsteps echoed faintly from the far end. The sound of early staff arriving, assistants balancing coffee cups and tablets, junior executives rehearsing talking points in their heads. The building was waking up, and with it came the danger of witnesses. He glanced back at Lily. Stay close, he said. And don't speak unless I ask you something. It is alive. She nodded, immediately stepping into his shadow, small enough to disappear behind the clean lines of his coat. Her trust in him felt sudden and heavy, like something fragile placed directly into his hands. They moved quickly but calmly, the way people did when they didn't want to draw attention. James nodded once to a passing executive, offered a brief morning greeting that sounded routine enough to avoid questions. No one looked twice. Lily kept her eyes down, her hand gripping the strap of her small backpack like an anchor. The elevator doors slid open. James ushered her inside and tapped the private access code. As the doors closed, the tension he had been holding finally tightened its grip. The car descended smoothly, numbers dropping one by one. Lily let out a breath she had clearly been holding. Are we in trouble? She asked. Not yet, James replied. And if I do this right, you won't be. She studied his face, searching for cracks. My dad says not yet means someone is thinking. That's accurate, James said. The elevator opened into a restricted corridor connected to a smaller conference suite. One of the few places in the building where he could speak freely without attracting attention. He guided Lily inside and closed the door behind them. The room was simple. Long table, frosted glass walls, a faint smell of lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of room designed for quiet agreements and uncomfortable truths. James pulled out a chair for Lily. She climbed into it, her feet once again dangling above the floor. I need to make a few calls, he said. While I do, I want you to eat something. He opened a cabinet and found a sealed package of crackers and a bottle of juice left over from a late-night meeting. He placed them gently in front of her. She looked at the food, then at him. You don't have to. I know, he said. I want to. She accepted it with a small nod, carefully opening the package as if afraid of making noise. James stepped a few feet away and dialed his personal counsel. The line connected almost immediately. "I need you to come in," he said quietly. "Now, and I need discretion." There was a pause, then a measured response. James ended the call without elaboration. Next, he messaged his head of internal audits, phrasing it as a routine early morning review. Nothing alarming yet. He pocketed his phone and turned back to Lily. "How long has your father been out of work?" he asked. 8 months, she replied between careful bites. "He tried to find another job, but they ask why he left. And when he tells the truth, they stop calling." James nodded. Black marks followed people longer than success ever did. "Did he ever talk about what he found?" James asked. "Not in words," Lily said. "He drew pictures instead. Boxes and lines. He said, if I could understand it, it meant he wasn't crazy." James felt a tightening in his chest. "And you understood it?" "Yes," Lily said simply. "Because it didn't make sense." The statement was so pure, so unfiltered that it cut through him. Adults learn to accept broken logic as long as it came wrapped in authority. Children didn't. "How did you decide to come here?" he asked. Lily finished her juice and wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve. "When I saw the same mistake again," she said. "The same one that got my dad fired. It was still there." James leaned against the table. "You checked the system from home?" She nodded. "Only the parts they didn't close. They think kids just play games." Another failure. Another assumption. "You understand that if this comes out the wrong way," James said carefully, "it could hurt your father more." Lily looked up at him, her eyes steady. "He's already hurt," she said. "I just don't want him to disappear." The room was quiet again. James glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:14 a.m. In less than an hour, the building would be fully alive. News traveled fast in places like this. Faster than truth. "There's something you need to know," he said. "What you found doesn't stop with one person." Lily tilted her head. "You mean it's bigger?" "Yes," James replied. "And people who benefit from it won't give it up easily." She considered that. "My dad says when people are scared, they lie." "That's true," James said. "Which means we have to be careful." A knock sounded softly on the door. James straightened instantly, his body reacting before his mind. He moved between Lily and the door as it opened. A familiar face appeared, older, composed, eyes sharp with years of experience. His counsel stepped inside, closing the door behind him without a word. "Good morning," the man said, then paused when he noticed Lily. James met his gaze. "This is why I called," he said. The lawyer said nothing at first. He took in Lily's posture, the empty juice bottle, the seriousness in her expression. Finally, he nodded once. "Then we should sit," he said. They did. James explained carefully, leaving nothing out, choosing his words with precision. He spoke of blind spots and deferred logs, of a termination that no longer made sense. He spoke of a child who saw what professionals had missed. The lawyer listened without interruption. When James finished, the room felt heavier. "This changes things," the man said at last. "Yes," James agreed. "It has to." The lawyer looked at Lily. "Do you know what it means to tell the truth when powerful people don't want it?" Lily nodded. "It means you have to keep telling it." The man smiled faintly. "She's right." James felt something settle into place. A plan. Still rough around the edges, but real. We start quietly, he said. Internal review, controlled exposure, no announcements. And the child? The lawyer asked. James looked at Lily. She goes home and she stays there. Lily frowned. You said you wouldn't forget. I won't, James said. But I need you safe so I can finish this. She studied him, then nodded slowly. 5 minutes, she said. That's what you gave me. James almost laughed. Yes, he said, and it turns out 5 minutes was enough to change everything. Do nice. Outside the room, the building buzzed with activity. Meetings were starting. Deals were forming. Decisions were being made without any idea of the fault line opening beneath them. James rose from his chair, feeling the weight of what came next. The day had officially begun, and nothing about it would be routine. Lily left the building through a side entrance most employees never noticed. James watched from a distance as she stepped onto the sidewalk, her small backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulders. His driver waited, with the car door open, posture neutral, eyes forward. No one watching would have thought twice. Just another child being picked up before school. Another ordinary moment in a city built on them. When the car pulled away, something in James's chest tightened. He stood there longer than necessary, hands in his pockets, the morning air cool against his face. For the first time that day, he felt the full weight of what he had agreed to carry. Lily had trusted him, not because he was powerful, but because he had listened. That kind of trust was harder to earn and far easier to betray. He turned back inside. By the time James returned to his office, the executive floor was fully awake. Assistants moved briskly with tablets tucked under their arms. Voices drifted through open doorways, low and efficient. The machinery of success had resumed its rhythm. Unaware of the fracture running through its foundation, James closed his door and locked it, not out of paranoia, but precision. He sat at his desk and powered up the workstation, pulling up the isolated drive where he had saved Lily's findings. He didn't rush. Rushing was how mistakes hid. He worked the way he had in his early days, methodical, patient, distrustful of conclusions that arrived too easily. The blind spots stared back at him. He ran independent diagnostics, cross-checking with archived system states from before Oliver Reed's termination. The pattern was unmistakable now that he knew where to look. Access routed through the relay carried inherited trust tokens, bypassing deeper verification. It was subtle, elegant, dangerous. Someone had known exactly how to use it. James pulled personnel access logs filtering for who had clearance to adjust that relay. The list was short, too short. Senior engineers, a handful of executives, people he had trusted enough to never look twice. His phone buzzed. A message from his counsel. I'm staying close. Call if anything shifts. It already had. James leaned back, rubbing his temples. He thought of Lily's hands hovering over the keyboard, careful not to touch anything without permission. He thought of Oliver Reed drawing diagrams instead of telling stories, trying to make sense of a world that had decided he was expendable. This wasn't just about a system flaw. It was about what happened when power learned how to erase evidence. He opened a secure channel to internal audit, rerouting permissions so the request came directly from his office rather than through standard executive chains. If anyone noticed, they would assume he was conducting one of his occasional deep dives, an eccentric habit, but a tolerated one for now. As files loaded, James's mind drifted back to the early years when Apex Vanguard was small enough that he knew every engineer by name. Back then, people argued openly. Flaws were challenged, not hidden. Somewhere along the way, growth had taught the company how to be quiet instead. The audit results populated slowly. Deferred alerts, overridden flags, reviews marked complete without timestamps. It wasn't sloppy. Sloppiness left fingerprints. This was clean, intentional, and repeated. James felt a cold clarity settle over him. Someone inside Apex Vanguard had built a second system inside the first. One that watched selectively, one that decided whose actions mattered and whose could be buried. He saved everything, duplicating the files across multiple isolated drives. If this went wrong, redundancy would be his only ally. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," James said, already knowing who it would be. His chief technology officer stepped inside, tablet in hand, expression neutral but alert. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes," James said. "Sit." The CTO complied, glancing briefly at the locked door. "Is this about the audit request?" "It is," James replied. "Tell me about the relay optimization." The CTO blinked, then recovered quickly. "Which one?" "The one no one looks at anymore," James said. A pause. Barely perceptible, but it was there. "That component has been stable for years," the CTO said. "It reduces load, improves performance, and bypasses verification," James added. The CTO's eyes flicked to the screen, then back. "It inherits trust from upstream checks." "That was the design." "Whose design?" James asked. The CTO hesitated. "It was approved at the executive level." "That's not an answer." The CTO exhaled slowly. "Yours," he said. "Ultimately." James nodded. "Approval is not authorship." Silence stretched. "Who maintains it?" James asked. "A small group," the CTO said carefully. "Senior clearance only." "Names." The CTO listed them. Each name landed like a measured blow. When the list ended, James spoke quietly. "Oliver Reed was not on that list." "No," the CTO agreed. "He raised concerns." "And what happened to those concerns?" "They were reviewed," the CTO said, "and dismissed." James finished. The CTO looked down at his tablet. At the time, the evidence suggested that he was the problem. "Convenient," the CTO stiffened. "Are you accusing someone of manipulating the system?" "I'm saying the system was manipulated," James replied. "And someone used it to make an example of a man who followed the rules." The CTO swallowed. "This is serious." "Yes," James said. "That's why I'm handling it." The CTO hesitated. "If this goes public." "It won't," James said. "Not yet. And the board, they'll know when I'm ready to tell them." The CTO studied him for a long moment. "You're certain?" James thought of Lily's voice. Of her certainty that if she stopped looking, the truth would disappear. "Yes," he said, "I am." After the CTO left, James remained seated, staring at the names on the screen. Loyalty, he realized, was not about silence. It was about responsibility. And responsibility, once ignored, always came back with interest. His phone buzzed again, a message from the driver. "She's home, safe." James closed his eyes, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He opened a new file and began outlining a plan. Quiet interviews, independent verification, no alerts triggered, no warnings sent. He would move like Lily had, carefully, deliberately, without drawing attention. The blind spot had been exposed. Now came the harder part, watching who panicked when they realized it was no longer dark. By mid-morning, Apex Vanguard was fully awake. James moved through the building with the practiced ease of a man whose presence set the tempo without raising the volume. Meetings unfolded. Assistants whispered updates. Screens lit up with forecasts and assurances. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, James counted patterns. He returned to his office and shut the door, leaving the blinds open. Transparency, he had learned, was often the best camouflage. He pulled up the personnel timeline surrounding Oliver Reed's termination, laying it side by side with the security logs Lily had helped uncover. The overlap was too precise to ignore. On the morning Marcus had been flagged for unauthorized access. The relay showed a surge of deferred verification. Nothing alarming on its own, but unusual when mapped against prior weeks. The access request attributed to Oliver had traveled through the blind spot, inherited trust, and emerged clean on the other side. The system had vouched for a lie. James leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands clasped. "This is how you do it," he murmured. "You don't break the rules. You arrange them." He expanded the view, adding approvals and internal communications. An HR memo appeared. Neutral in tone, decisive in outcome. Another email followed. Then another, language carefully crafted to suggest urgency, risk, and the need for swift action. The kind of language boards trusted. James recognized the rhythm. He had used it himself when time mattered more than deliberation. He opened the audit notes from the review committee. 5 names, all senior, all respected. Each had signed off within hours. No follow-up questions recorded. No dissent noted. The system had chosen Oliver because Oliver had made it easy. He was competent, quiet, and not protected by proximity to power. When he raised concerns, they were reframed as instability. When he insisted, he became a liability. The narrative had written itself. James stood and walked to the window, staring down at the city. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Oliver Reed was likely sitting at a kitchen table, waiting for the day to tell him what it had always told men like him. Nothing had changed. James turned back, jaw set. He began scheduling interviews, not official ones. Conversations. He invited senior engineers for brief check-ins under the pretense of a routine performance review. He asked open-ended questions and listened for the pauses, the evasions, the practiced neutrality. Most answered easily. A few answered too easily. By early afternoon, a pattern emerged. The same names appeared at the edges of decisions. The same voices spoke last in meetings, gently steering outcomes without ever appearing to command them. James requested a copy of archived backups from the period leading up to Oliver's termination, framing it as a compliance exercise. The files arrived quickly, too quickly. Someone wanted to be helpful. That too was noted. He isolated a thread of internal messages flagged as non-essential. In it, a senior manager referenced closing the loop on a potentially disruptive element. The tone was clinical, the implication unmistakable. James felt a familiar anger rise, but he didn't let it surface. Anger made noise. He needed silence. He cross-referenced access privileges. One name appeared repeatedly, positioned just close enough to the relay to manipulate it without drawing attention. A trusted executive, a long tenure, a reputation built on reliability. James stared at the name, letting it sit. This was the danger of blind spots. They didn't announce themselves. They waited for the moment when trust was highest and scrutiny lowest. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from the board liaison. James let it ring twice before answering. "Everything all right?" the voice asked. "Yes," James said evenly. "I'm reviewing legacy security architecture." "Audit flagged something." "Not yet," James replied. "But I don't like surprises." A pause. "Understood." The call ended. James exhaled slowly. Pressure would build now. It always did when people sensed movement beneath their feet. He pulled up a blank document and began outlining a chronology not of events but of decisions: who spoke, who approved, who benefited. It wasn't enough to know what had happened. He needed to understand why no one had stopped it. As the hours passed, the answer became clearer. Fear not of failure but of exposure. The relay had been designed to improve performance. Yes, but it had also created an opportunity. One person discovered it, another realized what it could hide. Together, they learned how to move through the system without ever appearing to touch it. And when Oliver Reed noticed, they acted quickly. James closed the file and leaned back. He thought of Lily's words. "It only watches everyone else." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said. His legal counsel entered, closing the door behind him. "I've reviewed what you sent," the man said. "It's enough to raise serious concerns." "Enough to act?" James asked. "Yes," the lawyer replied. "But not enough to accuse." "Not yet," James nodded. "I want to bring Oliver Reed in." The lawyer hesitated carefully. Discreetly. James agreed. "No promises, no announcements." "And the child?" the lawyer asked. "She stays out of this," James said firmly. "She already did more than anyone should have asked of her." The lawyer considered this. "If this escalates, there will be questions." "There already are," James said. "They just don't know it yet." The lawyer left and James returned to his desk, pulling up Oliver's contact information. The number sat there unchanged as if waiting. He hesitated for the briefest moment. Then he dialed. The phone rang several times before a cautious voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Reed," James said. "This is James Harlan." Silence. "Yes," Oliver said at last. "I know who you are." "I'd like to speak with you," James continued. "In person about your work." Another pause. Longer this time. "I told everything I knew," Oliver said quietly. "It didn't matter." "I think it matters now," James replied. "And I think it always did." A breath on the other end of the line. Measured. Weary. "When?" Oliver asked. "Today," James said. "If you're willing." The line went quiet. Then came a single word. "Okay." James ended the call and sat back, feeling the weight of the next step settle in. The system had chosen a scapegoat once. This time, it would have to answer for it. Oliver Reed arrived exactly on time. James watched from behind the glass wall of the smaller conference room as the man stepped off the elevator and paused just briefly to orient himself. Oliver looked thinner than James remembered. Not older. Exactly. Just worn in a way that came from months of restraint. From learning how to take up less space in a world that had already decided it was done with you. Oliver wore a simple jacket, clean but frayed at the cuffs. His posture was careful, guarded, the posture of a man who had learned that confidence could be mistaken for defiance. James stood as Oliver entered the room. Mr. Reed, he said, extending his hand. Oliver hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking it. His grip was firm, but restrained, professional, controlled. Mr. Harlan, Oliver replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes moved quickly. Door, walls, ceiling, cataloging exits, cameras, risks. James gestured to the chair. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I should, Oliver said as he sat. But my daughter said sometimes you have to show up even when it doesn't change anything. James felt that land. She's a remarkable child, he said. Oliver's expression tightened, concern flashing across his face. Is she? She's safe, James said immediately. At home. Oliver exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. Then I'll listen. James sat across from him, placing a folder on the table between them. He didn't open it yet. I want to be clear, James said. This is not a formality and it's not a defense. Oliver gave a humorless smile. I've already been judged. You don't need to worry about my expectations. James nodded. That's exactly what worries me. He opened the folder and slid a single page forward. A system map, the relay zone highlighted. Oliver's eyes fixed on it instantly. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he let out a breath that sounded like something giving way. You found it, Oliver said quietly. Yes, James replied. With help. Oliver closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was no surprise left, only a tired kind of recognition. I tried to explain it, Oliver said. Over and over. I documented everything. I followed protocol. I escalated through the proper channels. And they shut you down, James said. They reframed it, Oliver corrected. They said my access attempts were irregular, that I was overstepping, that I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Oliver's hands tightened together. When you're the one raising concerns, it doesn't take much to make you look like the problem. James leaned forward. Why didn't you come to me directly? Oliver laughed softly without humor. I tried. James stilled. I sent 3 requests, Oliver continued. They never reached you. At least not in a way that mattered. By the time I realized that, it was already too late. James felt a familiar unwelcome sensation, recognition. Layers of access filters designed to protect his time. Barriers that worked perfectly, too perfectly. They needed someone to blame, Oliver said. And I was convenient. James nodded slowly. Because you were loyal to the system. Oliver looked up sharply. Yes. That's the part one don't understand, James said. Why stay loyal when it was already turning against you? Oliver considered this. Because systems outlive people, he said. If you don't protect them, they rot. And if they rot, everyone pays. James sat back, the weight of the words pressing into him. He had built Apex Vanguard on that exact belief. Somewhere along the way, loyalty had been redefined as silence. Do you know who did it? James asked. Oliver shook his head. I suspected. But suspicion isn't proof. And proof disappears when the wrong people control the logs. James slid another document forward. Access timelines, internal approvals. Oliver scanned it, his jaw tightening. They didn't even change the pattern, he said. They just assumed no one would ever look again. They assumed trust would protect them, James said. Oliver met his gaze. Trust always does until it doesn't. Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. Your daughter, James said carefully, found the blind spot on her own. Oliver's eyes softened. She's good at seeing what doesn't make sense. She shouldn't have had to, James said. No, Oliver agreed. But she learned from watching. James thought of Lily sitting in his chair. Eyes locked on the screen even as his voice startled her. Courage, he realized, didn't always look like fearlessness. Sometimes it looked like refusal. I want to fix this, James said. Oliver studied him. Fix it how? Quietly at first, James replied. Then completely. And what happens to the people responsible? Oliver asked. That depends, James said. On how much they're willing to tell the truth. Oliver let out a slow breath. I don't want revenge. I know, James said. That's why I called you. Oliver looked down at the table. I just want my name back. James nodded. You'll have it. For the first time since entering the room, Oliver's composure cracked just slightly. His shoulders sagged as if he had been holding himself upright by will alone. Why now? Oliver asked. Why believe this after all this time? James didn't answer immediately. He thought of Lily, of her steady voice, of the way she had trusted him without leverage or protection. Because someone reminded me what loyalty is supposed to look like, he said at last. Oliver followed his gaze, understanding dawning. James closed the folder. I'm going to need your help, he said. But I won't ask you to do anything that puts you at risk. Oliver nodded. I already lost everything once. Not everything, James said. You raised a daughter who wouldn't let the truth disappear. A faint, fragile smile touched Oliver's lips. Tell me what you need, he said. James felt the final piece lock into place. The machine had chosen a scapegoat because it believed loyalty could be exploited. It had underestimated the kind that endured. Oliver stayed longer than James expected. They moved from the conference room back into James's office. The space now feeling different, less like a command center, more like a crime scene waiting to be understood. James closed the door and activated a privacy mode that dampened sound and disabled internal sensors. Officially, it was meant for sensitive negotiations. Unofficially, it was one more layer of silence. Oliver stood near the desk, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the familiar layout. Nothing's changed, he said quietly. Same view, same screens. That's the problem, James replied. Too much stayed the same. James pulled up the financial dashboard, overlaying it with the security architecture Oliver knew so well. At first glance, the numbers were clean: quarterly revenue, operating margins, steady growth, the kind of stability investors loved. But James didn't stop there. He drilled down. Vendor payments appeared, consulting fees, infrastructure maintenance costs, individually reasonable, collectively patterned. Oliver leaned forward. That frequency, he said. That's not random. No, James agreed. It's rhythmic. They aligned the payment schedule with the deferred verification windows Lily had highlighted. The overlap was subtle, but undeniable. Every time the blind spot pulsed, money moved. Small amounts routed through entities designed to look boring enough to avoid scrutiny. Ghost vendors, Oliver said. Yes, James replied. With real signatures. They traced approvals. Digital fingerprints led back to executive-level clearance. People authorized to sign without secondary review. People whose judgment was trusted by default. Oliver let out a breath. They weren't just hiding access, he said. They were laundering trust. James felt a grim satisfaction at the precision of the phrase. He opened a deeper ledger, one he rarely accessed himself. Compensation adjustments, special bonuses. Deferred incentives tied to performance metrics that no one outside the executive circle ever questioned. "Look at this," James said. Oliver studied the figures, his brow furrowing. "Those spikes," he said. "They coincide with the same windows. Every time the relay was exploited," James said, "someone got rewarded." Oliver straightened slowly. "And when I flagged irregularities, they needed you gone." James finished. Silence followed, thick and heavy. James thought of the times he'd praised efficiency, streamlined oversight, delegated trust. Each decision had felt reasonable. Each had carved out a space where accountability thinned. "Why not just fire you quietly?" James asked. Oliver shook his head. "Because quiet firings invite questions. Public ones send messages. Messages to anyone else who might notice." James nodded. "So they made you the story." Oliver's jaw tightened. "They made my name a warning." James closed the ledger and leaned back. The pieces were coming together now, not as a single villain, but as a system that rewarded silence and punished attention. "This isn't one person," James said. "No," Oliver agreed. "It never is." James stood and walked to the window, hands resting against the glass below. The city moved with relentless momentum. He wondered how many other systems functioned this way, smooth on the surface, corrosive beneath. "Here's what we do," James said without turning around. "We verify independently, no internal reviews, no committees." Oliver nodded. "External forensic accounting and parallel security audits," James added. "Blind tests." Oliver allowed himself a small, grim smile. "You're going to make them nervous." "That's the point," James said. "But not yet." He turned back to Oliver. "I need you to help me reconstruct the original timeline. Every report you filed, every response you got." Oliver hesitated. "Some of that's gone." "Not all of it," James said. "You kept copies." Oliver met his gaze. "I did." "Good," James replied. "We'll need them." They worked for another hour rebuilding events with careful precision. Oliver's memory filled in gaps the logs couldn't. Meetings where questions were redirected. Emails that arrived just late enough to be irrelevant. Conversations that ended with reassurances instead of answers. As they worked, James felt a growing clarity. This wasn't just about restoring Oliver's reputation. It was about dismantling a quiet economy built on controlled ignorance. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. James glanced at the clock. Late afternoon. He opened the door to find his assistant standing there, expression composed but alert. "You have a call," she said. "Board liaison marked urgent." James nodded. "Tell them I'll return it shortly." She hesitated, eyes flicking briefly to Oliver. "They're asking about the audit requests." "Tell them I'm reviewing legacy exposure," James said. "And that I'll brief them tomorrow." She nodded and left. Oliver watched the door close. "They're starting to feel it." "Yes," James said. "And when people feel pressure, they make mistakes." He saved their working files to a secure drive and handed Oliver a slim encrypted device. "Everything you remember, put it here. Don't keep copies elsewhere." Oliver accepted it, his grip firm. "What about my daughter?" he asked quietly. James didn't hesitate. "She stays out of sight, out of reach." Oliver nodded, relief evident. "She didn't do this for attention." "I know," James said. "She did it because she couldn't live with the lie. I, as alive did." Oliver stood, adjusting his jacket. "Neither could I." They shook hands, this time without hesitation. After Oliver left, James returned to his desk and stared at the numbers one last time. They no longer looked neutral. They spoke now, telling a story of decisions made in the dark. He opened a new document and titled it simply, Truth. Then he began to write. James didn't return the board liaison's call right away. He stood instead at the window, phone in his hand, watching a construction crew across the street guide steel beams into place. The work was loud, visible, impossible to ignore. Everyone could see what was being built, how it rose piece by piece. No one pretended it happened by accident. Inside Apex Vanguard, the most important structures were invisible. He turned back to his desk and opened the file Oliver had helped him assemble. Dates, names, decisions. Each entry was modest on its own, reasonable enough to escape notice. Together, they formed a pattern that was no longer deniable. This was the cost of telling the truth, James thought. Not exposure, not scandal, but time, attention, the willingness to keep looking long after it became uncomfortable. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the board. A text from the driver. They're home. Oliver and Lily. James allowed himself a brief pause, a breath that reached all the way down. He pictured Lily at a small kitchen table, legs swinging as she did homework, pretending, if only for a few hours, that the world made sense again. He returned the board liaison's call. James, the voice said immediately, tight with polite concern. We're hearing about unusual access requests. Yes, James replied evenly. You will. When? The liaison asked. Tomorrow, James said, after I finished verifying it. A pause. The board doesn't like surprises. Neither do I, James said. That's why I'm preventing one. The call ended without resolution. James knew what that meant. Lines were being drawn quietly. People were calling people. Explanations were being prepared. He opened a new secure channel and contacted an external forensic firm, one he had used years ago during Apex Vanguard's earliest days before reputations became liabilities. He authorized a limited scope engagement, careful with wording, precise with boundaries. Then he waited. Late afternoon light stretched across the office, turning the city amber and softening edges that were in truth anything but. James's thoughts drifted to a different apartment, a different table, Oliver Reed's kitchen. He imagined the quiet there, the kind that settled after disappointment had been repeated too many times. He imagined Oliver pouring coffee he didn't taste, staring at walls that had learned his silence. And Lily, who had learned that when adults stopped listening, systems kept lying. James closed his eyes briefly. When the forensic firm responded, it was exactly as he expected, professional, discreet, alert to the gravity beneath the surface. They requested access. James granted it, but only to the data he had already isolated. No one else needed to know yet. The waiting was the hardest part. As evening approached, James gathered his things and left the office later than usual. The building was quieter now, the day's urgency draining away into evening routines. In the lobby, a janitor nodded to him, earbuds in, mop resting against a bucket. Long day? The man asked casually. Long, James agreed. Outside, traffic crawled, the city exhaled. James walked a few blocks instead of taking the car, letting the noise and movement ground him. He passed a diner with fogged windows and a handwritten sign advertising pancakes for dinner. Pancakes. The thought caught him off guard. He returned home to an apartment that reflected success without warmth. Clean lines, neutral colors, furniture chosen for restraint rather than comfort. He loosened his tie and sat at the kitchen counter, phone face down, the silence pressing in. He thought of his own childhood, of nights when his mother worked late and the apartment felt too quiet. Back then, he had believed that building something powerful would make the quiet go away. He had been wrong. His phone vibrated again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Harlan," a woman's voice said when he answered. "This is Emily Carter. I'm calling from the forensic firm." "Yes," James said, straightening. "We've completed a preliminary pass," she continued. "And I wanted to flag something for you directly." James's grip tightened on the phone. "Go ahead." "The financial movements tied to the security blind spot," she said. "They don't just benefit internal actors." James closed his eyes. "External." "Yes," Emily replied. "Shell vendors connected to offshore accounts. This goes beyond internal misconduct." James felt the weight shift deepen. "How confident are you?" he asked. "Confident enough to recommend expanding scope," she said carefully. James nodded even though she couldn't see it. "Do it," he said. "But keep it quiet." "Understood," Emily said. "One more thing." "Yes." "The access pattern that initiated this," she said. "It started years before Oliver Reed raised concerns. He wasn't the first to notice." James sat very still. "What happened to the others?" "They stopped escalating," Emily said. "Or they left." James ended the call and stared at the wall. This was bigger than he had thought. Not just a scapegoat, but a lesson repeated until it worked. A system that taught people what happened when they spoke up. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk tonight." James didn't need to guess who that was. He typed back a single word. "Tomorrow." He placed the phone down and stood, walking to the window. The city lights blinked on one by one. A grid of lives intersecting without ever fully touching. Lily had come to him because she believed truth was something you fixed, not something you waited for. James understood now that fixing it would cost him comfort, allies, perhaps even control. It would cost him the illusion that leadership meant insulation. The cost of telling the truth was not paid all at once. It was paid daily, slowly, willingly. He turned away from the window, resolved. Tomorrow, he would say what needed to be said, and once said there would be no putting it back. The executive floor looked different when James arrived the next morning. Nothing had physically changed. The same glass walls, the same muted colors, the same low hum of climate control and distant city noise. But James felt it immediately, the tension beneath the surface, the careful way conversations paused when he passed. The slight delay before doors closed. Someone had talked. He walked into his office without acknowledging the glances, setting his briefcase down with deliberate